What are we doing with Travis Kelce in FFPC drafts? How does the Miami Dolphins passing attack change for 2025? And what do we expect from the New Orleans Saints with a new head coach who just won a Super Bowl? That and more tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, plus three-time FFPC Dynasty champ Jeff Deasing is going to join us here tonight on the show. You'll never guess what city is his hometown. Appleton, Wisconsin. We'll bring that up and much more. We've got a great show for you. Ferrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour starts now.
Can't stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Ferrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you, Rob, and greetings and salutations to all of you Balkaholics and Ferrelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship over at myffpc.com. I am once again your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. You may know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the Better Sports Network High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, and of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship over at myffpc.com. I'll bring in my co-host, Ferrell Elliott, in just a second. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to go hard on a lot of Dynasty content. All you guys are clamoring for it right now, so now is the time that we're going to bring you as much as we possibly can, including but not limited to what to do with Brandon Ayuk, what are we doing with Alvin Kamara in Dynasty Leagues, and we'll get into some rookie talk, possibly, and what you need to know for managing your Dynasty teams into greatness in this offseason for the 2025 playing season, which is coming up shortly in September this year. I want to remind you that the FFPC has a ton of Dynasty Orphans right now. myffpc.com. They range from anywhere from $77 up to $5,000. A lot of the teams have already been discounted for 2025 as well. So you'll notice when you pop in there to pick up a Dynasty Orphan team, you can get some pretty good deals on these right now over at myffpc.com. The FFPC Dynasty Leagues have been around for a decade and a half. Over 1,800 of them have gone off, and nary a one has folded in 15 years. That's right, 15 years, 1,800 leagues, not a single one's folded. Grab yours now at myffpc.com. Plus, while you're there, play the FFPC Never Too Early and Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball tournaments. In the Never Too Early tournament, it's going to cost you $125 to join, a $40,000 grand prize, and then, of course, a $35 entry fee in the Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball tournament with a $10,000 grand prize. These tournaments have been ongoing the last couple of weeks. They're going to conclude on April 24th of this year, which is also the start of the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay, Wisconsin this year. Drafts available at the moment at 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks. myffpc.com is where to go for that. And don't forget, while you're there, you can also register for the Big Gorilla. Horrible Tarzan. It's too late at night for me to do a good Tarzan impression, but the Big Gorilla tournament is off and running. A $1 million grand prize in this with the FFPC, $350 entry fee. You get a 3-pack of teams for $1,000. Drafts are already off and running now with slow and live drafts going on. Early Rampage. If you are in on that, all you have to do is be one of the first 200 leagues to draft prior to June 14th, and you'll be entered in the Early Rampage tournament. The winner of that tournament will win a $10,000 grand prize. Remember, you could win the Early Rampage tournament and win the $1 million in the Big Gorilla this year, and that's for just one $350 entry free. The 7 Bananas promo is live as well. Don't forget, if you win the 7th pick in consecutive drafts, which we've already had happen, if you do it in 2 drafts in a row, which one user already has, $125 best ball team, boom, added to your account for free. That rolls all the way up to 3 7 picks in a row, 4 picks in a row, 5 7 picks in a row will get you a free jungle safari for 4, courtesy of the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Register now at myffpc.com. That's the Big Gorilla Tournament at myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live, which will be again tomorrow. And I'll give you more information on that at the end of the program. I've been talking way too long. Let's talk to the co-host with the most. The one guy you need to talk to when it comes to the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. You follow him on the book, the Instagram, and the X at jferrellelliott, at KFFSC official on the X, KFFSC.com, Commissioner J. Ferrell Elliott. Ferrell, a welcome to you on a Wednesday. We barely had time to recover from that amazing Super Bowl performance from the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh, Bucky, you are really bringing it tonight. I'm telling you, you're having a good week. Maybe we should always appear on Wednesdays.
On Wednesdays, yes, exactly.
I wonder if any of our people are out there. You're looking youthful. You're looking well scrubbed. I wanted to comment that the back, you've got something back there on the bookcase, but all in all, the wall's looking better. Everything's looking better. Philadelphia Eagles were something. And at our Sweet 16 Super Sunday party, Eagle fans were in the minority, but they were the loudest and most vocal, as you would expect.
Yes.
And they were big winners at the Casino Sportsbook, which we were all very excited about them. Kansas City Chiefs fans, on the other hand, that really put their hopes in Xavier Worthy scoring the first touchdown, any touchdown, and more than 1.5 touchdowns. We're very, very pleased. But the star of our weekend was all fantasy football, and I want to point out how much we appreciate your involvement in the drafting of the teams, and we're a complete sellout. The final is an online version next Tuesday night. And I just want to thank everyone that attended. It was our best year. It was our 4th year of doing this Super Bowl event, which was prompted by COVID and a number of other things. And, and Billy Hollywood, you should have been here because you would have had winning bets. So I'm ready. I'm already, every year I'm really looking forward to August. And now, based on what we had happen this past weekend, I'm looking forward to 2 great events forthcoming here in Louisville.
Yeah, I had a blast. I mean, it was awesome drafting, obviously, on Super Sunday. I wish I would have been at Caesars, Southern Indiana. It would have been so much more fun. But I did have a blast drafting. I'm excited to draft in the KFFSC coming up this Tuesday night, so less than a week away from my next KFFSC draft. Pumped to draft in that as well. Draft now, KFFSC.com, myffpc.com as well. You were talking about the Super Bowl, Ferrell. Let's lead into the elephant in the room, and that is Travis Kelce. On the New Heights podcast that he co-hosts with his brother Jason Kelce, he said he's going to, quote, take some time to decide whether he's going to return to the Chiefs this upcoming season. The quote from Travis Kelce, who, by the way, is 35 years old, coming up on his age 36 season. I'm going to take some time to figure it out. And I think I owe it to my teammates that if I do come back, that it's going to be a wholehearted decision, and I'm not half-assing it. Once again, Ferrell, wholehearted, not half-assing. So some as far as body parts go, being wholeheartedly, but not half-assedly. In 2024, big drop-off in his production, obviously in his efficiency. Lowest yards per route run of his NFL career, 3.9 yards after the catch per catch. That's the lowest mark that he's ever had with Kansas City. But Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, that is the full list of NFL tight ends that had more catches than Travis Kelce this past season. Quote from Kelce, I think I can play. It's just whether or not I'm motivated, or it's the best decision for me as a man, as a human, as a person, to take on all that responsibility. If he decides to walk away, big bump for Xavier Worthy, big bump for Rashee Rice. Ferrell, how are you handling Travis Kelce in drafts right now, knowing that FFPC players are taking him at the end of the 7th round as tight end 9 ahead of Evan Ingram, Tyler Warren, Dalton Kincaid, and Tucker Kraft? Me personally, in my Kentucky draft on Sunday, I stayed away. Don't trust him like some of those other guys behind him. How do you feel about Kelsey right now?
You know, in FFPC ball, catching the ball is what it's about. This is 1.5 points for every catch. He's going to make the catches. There's commentary here in the comment from an otherwise worldly and impressive fantasy player says that he's washed. You know, I don't use that expression with any football player, and especially Travis Kelsey. Whatever Travis Kelsey does, if he's not the Travis Kelsey he's been in years before, he's still better than most. It's an interesting commentary when he talks about as a human. You know, he's involved with one of the leading revenue creators in the history of entertainment. And she's her own business person, calling all her own shots. And that's a lifestyle that probably has room for him to be of assistance in that world. And so he's got some glorious options to consider. And whatever he does, I'm all for him. Sure, in these early drafts, you might want to avoid him until you get a better feel for it. But I think he's quite a competitor. I don't see him as being beaten and bruised. I see him as a player that loves to compete. You know what? I think he'll be back. And perhaps he'll come back on his own terms, and perhaps he'll come back with a different kind of training camp regimen than some of the other players. And you know, players are going to continue to play, Balky. There's better nutrition. There's there's better training rooms. Players are going to play longer, and we need to get used to that. And I think that's something to be celebrated.
You know, the other thing with Travis Kelsey in regards to fantasy drafts right now, let's just say he makes the announcement coming out tomorrow that, I'm back for 2025, ready to run it back, 4th straight Super Bowl appearance. That's what I want to do. I don't know if he ascends that much further in ADP. So at this point, if you're drafting him for 2 reasons. 1, you think he's going to contribute in 2025. And 2, you think you're getting a really good deal on him because people don't know whether he's coming back or not.
Right. Yeah. I'm definitely willing to take that risk. And I think that, you know, you talked about the Philadelphia Eagles and their dominant play, and you saw it doesn't matter the state of your quarterback when you have no offensive line. The game is won in the trenches, as we well know. And sometimes it appears that it's won somewhere else because the guys in the trenches play so well and they're evenly matched up. And they were completely overmatched on the offensive line. So I will say that everyone else in this division, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Raiders, all of them would have to look at it and say, man, I wish they hadn't gotten beaten like that, because when they do come back, they're going to come back focused and on point. You know, you've got a whole team, man, that is really, really wishing that they could get back to playing football very quickly. It's going to be a long off season for them. They're going to have some things. They're AFC champion with chips on their shoulder. And I think you take the Chiefs roster, you need to get as much of that as you can on your fantasy football team.
The Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary special is on this Sunday night. And as preparation, because I'm a big SNL fan, Ferrell.
Yes. And
for preparation, I've been watching a lot of the stuff that Peacock, the cock, as the kids say, have been offering me, including, but not limited to, a Questlove produced 3-hour music special about all the musical acts for the last 50 years. There is also a 4-part documentary I've been watching on SNL, and each episode focuses on a different aspect of it. The 4th episode was the weird season 11, which was 1985, when Lorne Michaels came back. And I promise you, I'm going somewhere with this. He came back after he left the show, had no cast. He hired John Lovitz, Nora Dunn, and then other unknowns, Randy Quaid, Anthony Michael Hall, Robert Downey Jr., Damon Wayans, kind of mishmashed them all together. And they didn't know if it was coming back. And it eventually did. And it came back with a bang. And I can't remember who said this. It was either Al Franken, who was one of the producers of the show that year, or Terry Sweeney, who was one of the cast members. And they said, could have been somebody else. They said it was the year you effed everything up to make sure that you would come back super strong the following year. And if that's not a microcosm for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2025, I don't know what is. Screwed everything up in that last game of the season, only to come back stronger, could be a possibility. buy low on the Chiefs right now. It may pay off big time for you in 2025. I want to move on. Go ahead.
Well, I want to talk just quickly about the Eagles. We saw a dominant football team and a general manager that people questioned his skill set when he first got here, and he put together a roster. Just like your Lauren Michaels example, he put together a roster that people were questioning about, certain players that were given up on, other players that were given key roles that were not evaluated highly as draft picks. I love the football team, and it's just fascinating to see what they did with it. So that's a team that with their quarterback, they were undefeated this year. I think that's correct. When their quarterback play was not injured in any game, they were undefeated. It's time to give attention to that team that it deserves. There was a whole lot of talk about other teams in the NFC. And that, Detroit is a thrill to watch for us as fantasy players. But in Philadelphia, I would say the same thing. Stack up Eagles and Chiefs. You're likely going to be playing meaningful fantasy football in December.
Can't argue that. Brown, Barkley, Smith, Goddard, Jalen Hurts. The list goes on and on for Philadelphia. We already mentioned the Chiefs as well. Speaking of one of those Chiefs that is not going to be back in Philadelphia next year, it is Kellen Moore. He has taken the head man's job over at the New Orleans Saints. From OC to HC does go Kellen Moore, according to Ian Rappaport. This is 2 days after the Eagles beat the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59. Kellen Moore, at the age of 36, will get his first opportunity to coach to be the head coach of a football team in the NFL. Now, this was, I don't want to say it was always expected to be a short-term thing, but I think Nick Sirianni was faced with the decision, hey, you need to go or you need to fix your coordinators. And he chose to fix his coordinators. And it was Kellen Moore in at OC. It was Vic Fangio in at DC, and they won a Super Bowl. Now Moore has moved on. The Eagles were 8th in total yards, 7th in points, 6th in EPA per play, 1st in rush yards EPA, obviously due in part big time to Saquon Barkley. Kellen Moore is going to have probably Derek Carr at quarterback for the Saints. He's going to have Alvin Kamara probably. Actually, I was listening to some podcasts this week. It's almost assuredly that Kamara is going to be there this year and next year as well. And then hopefully Chris Olave at wide receiver. We'll see what happens there. When you look at the Saints, Ferrell, as a whole, not talking about one specific member of the offense, but the offense as a whole, you can't help but look at this, at least I can't help but look at this, as a really good fit. Kellen Moore to New Orleans. I like these guys better, the fantasy players, the skill position players in New Orleans, better now than I did prior to the Moore hiring. Am I on the right track, or do you disagree?
Oh, I definitely agree. You've got a couple players there. Let's go. I believe Kamara is still got plenty to offer. Olave is one of my favorite picks, and it was the most pro-ready coming out of school in his draft class. I think he's proven that. I really like number 22 out of Weber State, Rashid Shaheed. Yeah. So Shaheed in the offense that this Coach Moore will put together, it's going to be terrific. This guy's just a born winner. He's 50-3 as a college quarterback. What do you think about that record, bud? And
It's unbelievable.
He's 6 foot tall quarterback. Gives me hope that some of my players around that size might get a shot. I don't know what the Saints are going to look like. We've got a draft and we've got free agency coming together. He's going to put his stamp on the team. The roster's going to look different. But he's a smart guy, and he knows how to get the best out of these top players. I predict a very good fantasy year for Saint players, but Shaheed would be the one that I would target because he's a value right now. I don't know where he's going, but I assume he's
I'll tell you right now.
He's coming off injury too.
That's the thing that I think not only could you be buying in Rashid Shaheed because of the injury, but because the New Orleans Saints offense towards the end of the season was a dumpster fire. Recency bias would have him slipping in drafts right now, and he is, Ferrell. According to Fantasy Mojo, Darren Armani at Fantasy Mojo on the X, fantasymojo.com. Armani, the godfather of the Pros versus Joes FFPC
great
championship. Fantastic guy. If you have the opportunity and you're playing in the FFPC, subscribe to fantasymojo.com. It is an invaluable resource. According to him,
you have the means, Bob.
if you have the means, I highly recommend it. It is so choice, a.k.a. said Ferris Bueller. Rashid Shaheed, wide receiver 55, right now at the 11-11 in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. That is behind Amari Cooper, Darnell Mooney, and Marvin Mims. It is right ahead of Keon Coleman, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnston. This is the guy that could be the number one for New Orleans this year. We'll see what happens with Olave. For sure, penciled in right now as the number 2. We'll see what New Orleans does in the draft, so on and so forth. But to get Rashid Shaheed right now as a wide receiver 5 is a good way to do it, for sure. A guy who knows the best way to do it in the Fantasy Football Players Championship Dynasty Leagues is tonight's guest, who we're going to bring on right now. He is a champion of 3 FFPC Dynasty Leagues over the years, and is back for more this year, playing in a ton of leagues, cashed in a ton of leagues this past year. And I want to bring him on right now. You follow him on the X at JDSing. That's JDESING. Please welcome onto the show Mr. Jeff Desing. Jeff, welcome in. Thanks for hanging out with us on Wednesday night, dude.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing good. Excited to have you on. Now, Ferrell, I didn't tell you this. I teased it at the top of the show. We have had a string of not Wisconsin guests, but Appleton, Wisconsin guests on the program over the last year. Cullen Hoffman, a winner of $260,000 in the 2023 FFPC Best Ball Tournaments and the FFPC Playoff Challenge. We had Mike Melberg on last month, a $1 million winner in the Fantasy Pros Championship. And now tonight, a 3-time winner in the FFPC Dynasty Leagues, Jeff Desing from, you guessed it, Appleton, Wisconsin. My hometown. I love it. Jeff, you're a big fan of it. What is it about Appleton, Wisconsin that has seemingly become the home of fantasy football over the last 365 days?
I don't know. I'm excited for it. And, I try and recruit as many people as I can, either at work or everywhere else, but it just seems to be, as I'm staring outside at all the snow we've gotten in the last 24 hours, maybe it's in the snow that follows here all the time.
It could be. It could. I had nobody cares about this, but I'll say it anyway. I had a dentist appointment this morning, and my dentist plays in the FFPC as well. And he could not talk. He could not stop talking. And we'll get into this here in a little bit. But he could not stop talking about T. Higgins to the Green Bay Packers. Farrell's going to ask you about that in a little bit. So, Jeff, you chew on that for T. Higgins in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Tell us, when you're not winning all these FFPC Dynasty Leagues, what are you doing for a living, my friend?
Well, I'm a CPA, so I'm a finance guy, and I spent quite a bit of time in the corporate finance world, typically as a hired gun, as a CFO or a controller for companies that had been acquired and needed to build new departments and start over after the acquisition. But about 8 years ago, got out of all that and purchased a chain of retail stores in northern Wisconsin that sells hot tubs, billiard tables, swimming pools, patio furniture, all the fun toys and games, pinball machines that you want on the interior and exterior home. So I've got 4 stores spread across northern Wisconsin here, selling that to anybody who wants to find a way to enjoy their time in the winter indoors or outside in the summer, obviously when it's a little bit nicer here.
I have long believed, Balky, that every home should have at least 2 hot tubs. So
2, not just 1, 2 hot tubs.
I like to hear that.
It's very important.
Well, you got to get the 2 hot tubs, and you got to get the cold plunge tubs now. You got to start that regime, right? Just keep.
Well, it gets a little beyond, but 2 hot tubs has always been the norm.
Sure. That's funny.
I'm, 2 hot tubs for me and my buddy Doc. 2 wide receivers for Cincinnati, and it's hard to say who's 1 and 1A as fantasy players. As fantasy players go, in our activity that we just had this past weekend, Jeff, the first player off the board, or first sticker on the board, was Jamar Chase. But T. Higgins was a 3rd-round draft pick. And I think, you think about a player, you say, well, that player's moving, and he'll be the number 1 somewhere else. It doesn't matter, because as the number 2 in Cincinnati, he delivers exactly everything you want as a wide receiver. I really hate to see the idea when Balky talks about Jeff coming to the Packers. That's just T. Higgins come to the Packers. That's a great place for him, Jeff. But, that just froze the ambition of all our people from the area here because, Cincinnati's 80 miles up the road. So let me ask you your thoughts on T. Higgins. What are you doing with him in fantasy football? And since you are a Wisconsin guru, just like Balky, what are your predictions looking into your crystal ball there? What are your predictions of the landing spot for T. Higgins?
Well, I mean, as far as what I'm doing on the dynasty side of things, I mean, for me, this goes back to 12 months ago. I mean, I think right now he's my number one owned wide receiver on all the teams that I have. I own him at about 33, 34%. And when I was looking at orphans last year, bringing on new teams, like T. Higgins was the guy that I wanted. And I felt like, coming into last year, he either was going to continue to do what he did in Cincinnati or he'd end up on a different team because they'd ultimately trade him. I think it'd be lovely to see him stay in Cincinnati. I don't know how they pull it off. I don't know that we've ever seen a team that's got Chase, Higgins, Burrow, Hendrickson, all those guys pulling down that cap value. How a team does that in today's world, maybe it's possible. I certainly would be intrigued by the possibility of how that would come together, but I don't think it can work. I just don't.
Never spending money before. That might be how it works.
Right.
Mike Brown could definitely tell you how. But but let me throw this at you. At Green Bay, it would seem magical because he could become the dependable receiver there. You can think of all these great places for him. But let me throw you some like Baltimore. Baltimore, he takes a bit of a hit. What does he do if he were to show up in Dallas? If he were to go to Denver, how would that elevate Bo Nix? And does Bo Nix get the ball to him like Burrow does? But I think you've hit on it correctly, and you're your most owned player in all dynasty teams because you're in a situation that wherever he is, he's going to produce. But I wonder what the ceiling is. I wonder what that team, that magical team, where the great ceiling for T. Higgins is.
Well, I think, I mean, I agree. There is going to be a team out there. I mean, you obviously hit the nail on the head on some of them. I'll touch quickly on the Green Bay side of things. Sure, I'd love to have him come to Green Bay. And I know Balky's talked about this. There's got to be a player there in the concentration of targets. And when we talk about the receivers that are in play in Green Bay, whether you talk about Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Dontavian Wicks, you name it, excuse me, they've got to have somebody who can step up and get the ball. And I'd love for that to be Higgins. I think he'd do a good job getting schemed open by LaFleur. But, I look at Washington, obviously look at New England, and I don't know, with the kind of cap value that New England has available, which I think, it's not the highest, it's pretty darn high in the league. Are they finally going to do what they can't do in the draft and go get that player? And I don't know how, knock on wood for T's sake, I don't know how you can make that a mistake if you do go get him and you pay him the money, right? So if you are New England and you're Kraft and you're sitting back there feeling what you're feeling about what's going on in the last 12 to 18 months, you're trying to move past Brady, you're trying to move beyond Belichick, you're trying to put that stuff behind you and what happened this year. You brought in the right coach, in my opinion, and if you want that quarterback to do something now, you have to go acquire this guy. Now, will they do it? I don't know. I said, Washington, I'd love to see him go have Jaden Danielson in the ball too. Put him with that quarterback, and I think you just continue to see them ascend.
Wow.
Right.
Every general manager in the business can take a point of it and says, you know what? We're winning, and T. Higgins could be the missing piece.
I 100% agree with you. I would find very few teams in the league that can't make a very strong argument for accumulating talent like that.
I think that's the great thing about Higgins, guys, is, and I know we're talking dynasty here, but Higgins in the Never Too Early FFPC best ball tournament right now, wide receiver 14 at the 304. Wide receiver 14. He's still being treated as a borderline top 12 receiver. And if that's the case, the FFPC market is telling us it doesn't matter where he goes. He is going to be valued no matter where he is. And if it's Cincinnati again, great. If it's not, he's going to be valued in Washington, New England, any Denver, Dallas, any of these places Ferrell brought up as well.
Well, I'd be curious your guys' thoughts quick on that. Last week, February 6th, I acquired Higgins, I acquired Olave, got both of those guys. I gave up Rashee Rice. Now, I understand the talent that's there, but I'm concerned about the suspension. I'm concerned about the injury. I'm concerned about whether he's going to be able to make it back to any sense of decency for a dynasty team next year, and I'm not willing to wait. But I gave him up for, I got the two of those guys for Rice, Addison, and I think I ended up throwing in a 4th-round pick in there. And again, I look at that and say, a lot of people are going to look at that and say Rice is the most talented player in that deal, and you like to have the side of a trade where you get the most player. But I don't know if that's the case, and I would make a pretty strong argument that I think T. Higgins could arguably the most talented player in that deal, and I was happy to get him with Olave, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, tonight. I think there's talent there as well, but
So just to recap, Jeff, you got T. Higgins and Chris Olave for Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, and a 4th-rounder.
Yes.
I'd much rather have the Higgins and Olave side of the deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, for what we just talked about, I don't know how much dynasty value is changing with Higgins, regardless of where he goes. Right. Rice, what's the most important season in dynasty? This following season. Right. We think that he's okay for the injury. At least I'm not concerned with the knee injury. I'm concerned about the suspension. You're talking about missing maybe half the regular season in the FFPC for Rashee Rice, if not longer. You have Addison, who is clearly still the second banana to Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. We don't officially know who the quarterback is there. The 4th-rounder, it's a 4th-rounder. Maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't. But to get this low on Chris Olave, and I know he's had these concussions, you're never going to get him at a lower price than you are right now. So I would much rather. I feel like you talk about the best player in the deal. Is it Rice? Maybe, but I think you can easily make a case that it's Higgins. And if it's Higgins, then yeah, clearly I love the Higgins Olave side of this deal for sure.
Right, and to digress to like Olave, Olave is moved 2 times in my leagues in the last week for a 2nd and 4th-round rookie draft pick. In my ground when I see those, and frankly it makes me so mad because I'm at work and it's the middle of the day, and guys come on a message. I appreciate it. It's not like he's just moving it, right? He puts that on the message board, gives everyone in the league a chance to get a deal sent in, but I can't get a deal sent fast enough during the middle of the workday
right
before I see that and the guy's gone, right? And it's I just don't know how people are moving on from talent like Olave for a 2nd and 4th-round pick this time of year. There's nowhere to go but up for him. And I think it's the same thing for Higgins.
It's like Snoop Dogg talking about T-Mobile. You're giving it away too quick. Don't give it away so quick.
Right.
And I'll say this, like in my dynasty leagues, if I'm dangling a talent like that, man, that's not something I dangle for like 8, 10, 12 hours. It's like 8 days.
You're a noted dangler.
10 days, see to make sure I'm getting the best. I'm the opposite of Nico Harrison for the Mavericks, right? I want to make sure I'm putting that out there as long as possible, get all takers and see what happens.
And I'm for sure not sending the message that says I'll take a 2nd and a 4th. I'm putting it out there that I'm dangling them. What do you want to give me, right? That's to your point. It just blows my mind sometimes on the dynasty side of things in FFPC what some of these owners do.
The guy really wanted a 2nd and a 4th.
Right. It's like if you were putting it on eBay, Jeff, the reserve price was not met.
It
was not met. So it returns to the buyer. It happens. I want to keep it moving, but I want to stay on this receiver conversation. Jackson Smith-Njigba had a phenomenal season. Well, not phenomenal. He was not phenomenal. He was awesome last year. Mm-hmm. Ryan Grubb came over from the Washington Huskies to take over the Seattle Seahawks offense as OC last year, and he loved to pass as much as he could. He is gone now, and it's seemingly because Mike McDonald wanted a more balanced attack. So what does he do? He goes down to New Orleans, plucks Clint Kubiak out of the Saints situation, and Kubiak has already said he wants to use a fullback. He wants to put more of an emphasis on the ground game, obviously with Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Knowing that recency bias is huge when it comes to dynasty fantasy football, should we be shopping Jackson Smith-Njigba around just to see what we get with him, for him, knowing that maybe his 2025 isn't going to be as good as his 2024?
I certainly hope people are shopping him because I'm going to acquire that talent. I'm not shopping him myself. First of all, I think he was 23, 24, 25% target share in that offense last year. Yes, it's going to be a total change this year. I don't think Lockett, that was mid-teens target share, 13, 15%. I don't see that going anywhere but further down. So I think there's a further ability to concentrate whatever targets there are to him. I'm not sure where things lie with Metcalf these days. We could talk about that for an extended period of time, I'm sure. But I think JSN's the talent there. And I think, I generally tend to believe at the end of the day, whether it's offensive coordinator or a coach, they're going to find ways to get talent the ball. I think, in the offshoot of the Shanahan system that Kubiak is running, everything in that offense is based on concealment, right? How do we, through the first, several seconds of progression coming from the snap of that ball, everything looks like it's a run or a pass, identical at the same time. It's concealment there. It is about what are we doing to, in quarter one, in this alignment, in this play, concealing it as long as we can, and ultimately running or passing the ball so that, next quarter or 5 plays from now or second half or more frequently, we're coming out in the same setup, the same concealment, the same deception, and we're deviating off of that very quickly. And, as a diehard Packer fan, I've certainly experienced the downside of what can happen to the Packers when we're going up against a Shanahan scheme in the way that we in at times have been destroyed trying to defend against that. And I think that this even goes back to LaFleur and the Packers last year compared to this year, which is why I think in a lot of cases the Packers struggled. I can't tell you how many times you've watched Packer game last year, or anybody who's running one of these schemes effectively, and I think Kubiak can, wide receivers are just wide open, and the quarterback can just get them the ball. And that happened with the Packers last year. It didn't matter. There would be a defender within 10 yards of a player. And I think when that happens, for a guy like Geno Smith, who I think can sling the rock, and they've said, both him and McDonald, Geno Smith can sling the rock. I think that no matter what that play design is, at the end of the day, if you're able to scheme your receivers open with the deception from a Ken Walker and a Charbonnet back there, Jason's the guy that's going to be there. So I want him. I want him as much as I can possibly get him. We can talk about McDonald on the defensive side as well. I think that defense will only get better. And if that defense only gets better next year, it just will make it that much affordable for them to run a controlled offense, taking advantage of that deception and concealment, taking advantage of the good running backs that they have. You can pick your choice between the two of those guys. I like them both. But with those guys in the backfield and JSN and Metcalf out there, I don't even know if they need to have a halfway decent tight end, right? I mean, I'll take those four guys and Geno Smith, and I think there's a successful offense there.
A very decent blocking tight end would work in that system.
Agreed.
As would work in New Orleans. And I'll ask you this. We played around with it earlier because we like the changes that are forthcoming in New Orleans. And so from a dynasty perspective, I don't ever think you can get value for your aging players. You're better off to hold on to them. Matter of fact, I end up being tempted acquiring them on the cheap in my dynasty, where I certainly have not had the track record that you have. So we brought up Alvin Kamara. I love his pass catching skills. I think that keeps him in the league and keeps him viable as a fantasy player for a long, long time. But I don't believe that he's through as a top rusher in the league. Your thoughts on Kamara going through, and if you can acquire him, I like that expression you used. I'd like to acquire that talent. Is Kamara a aging but a talent you would still like to have?
Yes. I think I'm at 25% ownership on him, which is at the top of my running back percentage of ownership. I mean, I don't know that I have anybody owned more than him. And again, that goes back to orphan acquisition and accumulating players out there. I like to hear your comment that I don't think you ever get the value that you want to get for aging talent. And I have always believed that on the dynasty side of things. Frankly, I think when you are a buyer of that, you probably, in a lot of cases, can end up on the better end of that deal. And, I look at last year, people want to run to the hills and get away from Kamara. He's aging, right? You listen to all mainstream media fantasy advice and get rid of this guy, be a year early, not a 2 year, not a year late, and yada, yada, yada. But the reality is, what standard scoring last year, FFPC, he was a top 5 running back.
Yep.
And you were stealing him last year, and the same thing can happen. And, and I'll say that, jokes aside, I mean, one of my buddies that plays in the home league with me, I think he's listening tonight. I moved Kamara to him last year. He inherited a guy who abandoned the team. It was a real crappy team, and he's in a total rebuild. I couldn't afford, based on our salary cap league, I couldn't afford Kamara. I moved Kamara. I regretted it at the time, but I needed to. And I know he's ecstatic to have him on his team, and that's how I felt on all of my teams. And I'll still take him. Anybody that wants to sell him at I'll say pennies on the dollar at a deep discount, I'll take Kamara right now. The pass catcher that you talked about, aspect of it, in just the overall concept of a guy that can win you a week when you need it the most. We've seen it. I mean, all my friends harassed me the 5 touchdown game he had.
Yeah.
Super Bowl week 3 years ago. I actually lost the Super Bowl in my long-standing league that year. I started out on a Thursday night with him racking up 5 touchdowns and thinking this is great for a Dynasty League Super Bowl, and I end up not winning it. But regardless,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, you never believe it, right? But I lost that Super Bowl with that, But again, I'd rather go into a Super Bowl with a guy scoring 5 touchdowns like that and know that it can happen at any time, or know he can pull it out on a week when the rest of your team isn't performing. A guy like him can do that. He's going to just catch the ball 7 times, 8 times, 9 times a game, rack up those yards, get a couple touchdowns. And again, you talked about Shaheed earlier when I was, kind of backstage listening. I agree with you on Shaheed. Olave, I just think, is a talent as well that you cannot get enough of.
See, Balky, I'm thinking like a winner.
Yes, you are.
Just got to get it to reflect in the stand. That's what's going
Well,
on.
you know what's funny, Jeff, is you bring up the Kamara thing, and I have him in a handful of Dynasty leagues, and I made the decision last year. I'm like, okay, he's getting up on that age curve. I will settle for a first-round pick or an early second-round pick, and I offered him pretty much to everybody who had those picks in all my leagues. Could not find any takers on it. Didn't budge off the price. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go with him in 2024 and see what happens. And it was good. And I'd probably make that same deal again this year. If somebody wants to give me a first rounder, an early second rounder, I'd probably do it. But I don't know. I'm not going to make the effort this year because
Jeff just told you not to do it.
Here's the thing. If I didn't get it last year, I don't think I'm getting it this year.
That's the funny thing, right? It's only going to go down in value. I totally agree.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you are in a quote unquote rebuild, and I don't know that I firmly believe in a rebuild. I'm always trying to. I never believe in the full blow up rebuild. I think you got to reallocate resources and continue to be in the fight every year. But I'll just say this on Kamara. Look, if I have a middling team or a team that isn't going to make it anywhere for me, the best scenario for me is somebody with serious talent goes down next year. It's on a contender's team. That contender needs somebody to replace. Now I'll move a Kamara, and I probably can get that first or potentially an early second, and that's when you make that move. But I think that's how you have to do it with Kamara. Otherwise, I think that you ride off into the sunset with him because you're never going to get the value that you should be getting for him.
I want to talk about a guy that you may or may not be able to get value for, and that's Dalton Kincaid, a guy that really crushed it the end of the 2023 season and then really disappointed in the 2024 year. If you have Dalton Kincaid on, let's say, an FFPC Dynasty team, Jeff, which I know you have him on a few of your teams, how many cents on the dollar would you be willing to part with for in exchange for Dalton Kincaid right now?
It's another one. I don't know that I am, and I read the reports and I get the information. He's held back or he's hampered right now because he's not as good a blocker. Can understand the blocking scheme, which is preventing him from being in on key situations that lets him release and be a receiver and get the additional targets. And there's tons of information out there about that. But he's another guy. My top 2 highest owned tight ends are Hockenson and Kincaid. I find it interesting how quickly we see a guy like Laporta come in, we see a guy like Bowers come in, we see These rookies who could never do anything before, right? And suddenly now they're scoring points in fantasy, and that's great. And how quickly we want to move away from the concept that, for the last 25, 30 years I've been playing fantasy, that, it takes a tight end 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. It might take a second deal with a different team for them to really figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know, do you want to have Ferguson, Komet? Do you want to have, you probably have the ADPs up there, Tucker Kraft. I don't know who is in that range. He finished 20th, 21st, somewhere in that range, I think, as a scorer in standard dynasty. I'm not happy with that by any means, but it was so easy this past year to have a talented player like that I still think he's got a phenomenal quarterback. The quarterback's got to figure out a way to give him the ball, and I think he will. I think I have enough faith that Josh Allen will hopefully get the ball to Kincaid. But I think at the end of the day, I'm willing to wait to see what comes out of that. I'm willing to wait to see if he materializes into something, and I'm willing to back him up this year with Ertz, who you could basically get for free on waiver wires, right? You could get where's my brain at? There was who else was out there? It was Ertz and John Smith, right? These are guys that you were serviceable for you throughout the year, and I think that happens all the time with tight end, right? Mm-hmm. You're gonna find guys that nobody else wants that are on the waiver wire. That maybe you got somebody like Kincaid, who's not worse than anybody else, who's between 10 and 20 in the rankings profile, right? And you hold on to him and you hope for it. You hope he, like to see his targets certainly increase. But I was telling a guy the other day, do I think he's going to be Kelsey? No. But I think Kelsey in year 1 and year 2 was somewhere around 80 targets, 100 target range in the first 2 years. I think Kincaid's at, 90 and 75. I don't think that's that far off. And I don't think there's a reason to believe that he can't figure out how to block a little bit better and figure out a way to get more targets and more opportunity with that quarterback slinging the ball.
And I think if you go into the market, you might be able to acquire him for much, much less than you think, because there's a lot of guys, a lot of vitriol for this player. They just say, boy, did he, because they blame the ruinization of their team from last year on Kincaid, who they overspent. It's pretty fascinating. I think the best is yet to come in Detroit, and I think it comes through Jamar Gibbs. I can't wait to draft him this coming year. From a dynasty perspective, I think he's a hold on through his entire career. For you, buy, sell, or hold Jamar Gibbs?
Yeah, that's a buy. If I can get him, I want him. I think he is your generational talent. I think he's top 3 running back prospect every single year. Rinse, repeat. Yes, you have Montgomery there. Yes, that guy is going to steal some fantasy points. I get that, but you saw what he could do when Montgomery was out. You saw a level of explosion in a player like that when he touches the ball. He's running at a different speed. He just is visible to the naked eye. This guy is more talented than other players on the field. And
there's enough to go around.
Yes, there's plenty. And when it comes to fantasy, that is talent that I want, and I can't get enough of him on any of my teams.
I want to talk about another player here who probably is near and dear to our hearts here, Jeff. Davante Adams, former Green Bay Packer. A guy that is probably not going to be a New York Jet in 2025. We know that Aaron Rodgers is probably not going to be New York Jet as well. Is this a package deal? Does Davante Adams follow Aaron Rodgers? We don't know. There's a lot of different things that can happen. However, if you are in the business of dynasty fantasy football and you have the opportunity to either make offers for acquiring him or getting rid of him, how do you value a guy like Adams right now? A, not knowing what team he's going to be on, and perhaps more importantly, B, not knowing who his quarterback is going to be.
Yeah, it's tough. It's real tough. And I think from that standpoint, if I have him on my teams, I'm not looking to get off of him. I'm going to hold him and see what will happen. In the same respect, if somebody's shopping him, which I'm seeing that on my leagues, I'm seeing message boards and chats out there that he's available. I'm not convinced to buy him yet because again, there's so much unknown and what that's gonna look like and how it's gonna shake out. And you got a guy who's 32 years old. You know, I think we're closer to the end for a guy like that than maybe you want. And I'm not sure how much of a success he's going to bring to your team if you don't have that right quarterback and you're in that championship window. So I'm just real leery to acquire him right now, but I won't get rid of the teams where I have him. How do you put a value on that with all that unknown right now? It's difficult. I think if I needed to have him and I really thought this guy was going to make a difference maker, which I don't normally do trades like that because fantasy gods and luck and injury and everything else that comes into play, it's a risk to acquire a guy like that right now. I genuinely believe it. But I think 2 second-round picks, I'd rather do a 25 and a 26. I'm not opposed to that type of price on him. I think anybody who wants anything that has got a first in there is just not in the right realm of where they're at. And I think anything less than that is probably too low, but I know that I'm not going to pay that for him right now, 2 seconds, because would be real leery, whether it's him or even a Cooper Kupp out there, right? These guys get up there and I can make some strong arguments that cliff is going to come real quick, different than a guy like Kamara that we talked about earlier. I'd rather ride Kamara off into the sunset. Adams, if I have him, which isn't on a lot of teams, I'll ride it out, but that's it.
Jeff, I never trust anyone who doesn't want to go to Las Vegas. Are you coming to the main event at Paris and Planet Hollywood and all? Are you going to be at the main event in Las Vegas?
I won't. I'm not a main event player.
You can become one. It's there. You click on main event. You start buying teams. That's what you need to do because you might as well deal in supremacy of all elements of the FFPC. And you're welcome to show up in Kentucky too, because we've been welcoming anyone from Appleton, Wisconsin.
I'll be up there.
I like horse country. By the way, are you a Mile of Music guy? You go to Mile of Music?
I do occasionally, but I got 3 kids under 10, so you can imagine my schedule is.
You're getting out all the time.
Yeah,
but Ben Johnson didn't go to Las Vegas. He went to Chicago. Now, knowing the Chicago roster like you do, you guys are experts. You and Balky are experts on not only the Packers, but the teams in that division. You know more about them than the average Joe. Who benefits the most, and particularly with Ben Johnson coming in, what becomes of the future of DJ Moore?
I think it's a great question. And I think just at the outset, I have nerves for my 6-year-old son that he's going to have to grow up in a period of time that he hopefully falls in love with the Packer team that I love to death, but I think he's going to fall in love with the team and not understand what it's like to, win the division every year and be amongst 3 other teams that maybe have not been that competitive, because it is not that team anymore. And, this thing turned around, fortunately for me, when I was in my mid-teens is when the Packers got good and Favre and everything else, and I've never looked back. That's my life, right? But my son is going to be different. My parents before me were different. I'm scared of Ben Johnson going there. And I think that it's personal when you start throwing LaFleur's name out in a press conference. I like to see that. I think it's good. But I think that is a team with a quarterback and talent that is going to do what it needs to do. Now, DJ Moore, I've always, sometimes I'm hit or miss. Sometimes I'm hot. Sometimes I'm cold. I really liked him this year. I don't know what my ownership percentage was, but there was some stuff going on there, and he was disgruntled. You could see it. I don't know if it was the head coach. I don't know if it was the offensive coordinator. I don't know if he felt that Williams wasn't picking things up fast enough as a quarterback. I don't know that we really know what had him upset, and he wears that on his sleeve, and he's kind of been a player that's always, I think, been known for that, right? So I think if that is not something that's simmering in the building culture-wise, that's eating away right now, I think DJ Moore certainly is somebody in that offense with Ben Johnson that can succeed. But I like to look at the other side of it, and I'm curious your guys' perspective. I mean, I think Rome Odunze is the caged bulldog right now that is just lathered up and drooling at the mouth and ready to explode. And I think that we didn't get to see enough of him this year. You got to figure out how you're going to jockey him with Moore and Keenan Allen. I'd be shocked if Keenan Allen comes back, personally. I think you let Odunze out and Moore, and I think with the decent quarterback they have, there's nowhere to go but in the right direction for those guys.
If I'm remembering correctly, it was Ryan Reynolds on last Thursday's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show pointed this out to me. And if it wasn't him, it was somebody else. I apologize. Rome Odunze was on the field for the Bears more than DJ Moore, more than Keenan Allen. Like, he was out there a ton last year. Didn't always get the targets,
right? But
he was out there, which to me suggests that not only did the Bears trust him, but he could block. He could do everything that was being asked of him. I'm with you. Keenan Allen, to me, I don't think he's going to be back in Chicago. If he is, he's sort of like a guy at this point, at least in that offense this year.
Right.
I'm with you. If you look at Odunze right now, he is going 2 full rounds behind DJ Moore. I think that's too much. The problem with him in Dynasty is I think anybody who invested in him as a rookie last year as the de facto number 3 receiver off the board, they would rather pull out a couple of molars and trade those things to you rather than Rome Odunze at this point. So he's going to be a tough get in Dynasty. I don't think you want to part with him in Dynasty. Maybe the sell becomes DJ Moore in Dynasty. Although, as you said, Jeff, that's tough. Like, we're getting into the minutia here, and I don't really have a strong feeling on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I just, I think that's the echoing theme that I always feel when I'm playing the majority of my leagues, which are Dynasty. I'm not a big seller. I'm going to ride talent as long as I can. I think DJ Moore fits the mold on that. I still think there's an opportunity there with this quarterback who I think had some good moments this year. I don't think he was great all the time. I still was happy finding him on orphan teams that were out there that, people drafted him and then they put their team up for sale or they put it up for sale in Dynasty Depot. And here you have, Caleb Williams sitting out there, and I'll invest in that for the long run, the 2 to 3 to 4 year horizon there. And I think that will just help DJ Moore and make a run at it. But it scares me. It scares me just outside of fantasy, just as a general Packer fan. I don't know what's coming in what direction now between Minnesota. I think they'll find a quarterback. Detroit, I think they're going to survive. The turnover at the coordinators and in Chicago, we're in a dogfight, and that is a division that is not going to be a pleasant one to play in for quite some time. It's going to be the rumblings of AFC North, right? And those guys just beating up on each other all the time. I think that's going to happen for quite a bit of time.
The NFC North and the AFC West going to be 2 of the best divisions in pro football, not only in 2025, but going forward. As Ferrell would say, get those players on those teams because you want to be in business with them when they're beating up on the non-NFC North and the non-AFC West teams. Exactly. Ferrell, speaking of you, my friend, we have time for one more question for Mr. Deasting tonight.
I just completed our draft this past weekend over Super Bowl weekend. Rookies were flying off the board, sometime a little bit higher than I thought they should. But it gave me a good idea of the landscape. And despite all the ones that were selected, there were some that went undrafted that I really liked. A couple guys Billy Hollywood asked me for. So I'm willing to accept any answer you want for this, but if you want to give me rookies, I'll be even more excited about it. Give me a player that you gotta have for Dynasty, and give me a player that you're completely through with. Which won't be a rookie, of course.
Yeah, no, I can answer. I can answer the ones I'm done with real quick, in no particular order. But we touched on it a little bit tonight. I'm not looking for Kelsey at all. Seeing him moving for 4th round draft picks now, 4th round rookie drafts. Okay, I might invest in that, but I mean, I think he's still going to play, but I don't think I want him. Pickens scares us out of me. There is talent with that kid, but that is a time bomb, I think, waiting to explode. And I have the fear in a player like him that when you need him the most, something's going to happen. And something is going to, he's going to get kicked out of the game. He's going to Antonio Brown moment. I hate to make the correlation because it's the Steelers, and I don't necessarily think that's fair, but he's a guy that I love the talent. I've had him on teams plenty of times, but I never feel safe any week that I got that guy. And I don't know if I'm going to get no catches or I'm going to have a blow game. We talked about Rice before. I don't want to invest in a player that's got that kind of profile with the injury, with the suspension. I don't think you can afford to do that when you're playing, higher stakes dynasty leagues. You can't make the hold justified for that guy being out, especially this year and going into next year. But the guys that I have to have, I mean, it's on the rundown that we talked about tonight. Higgins has been my number one guy since this time last year. I still want him now. And I'm very, very close behind him on Olave. And I don't know what will happen with Olave. I mean, look, we can talk about concussions and we can get into all of the aspects of that. But you look at a guy like, Brandon Cooks down in Dallas, and he had concussion scares up and down at the beginning of his career. And, that's kind of gone by the wayside, and the guy still produced. I think Olave is extremely talented. I think he's so cheap to be had right now that every year this is what happens. And there's players that have an abundance of talent that maybe it's in a new team, it's a new coordinator, it's a new situation, it's recency bias of all the stuff that's going on, and everybody remembering these concussions with Olave, and they just run for the hills. And I think that there are the passers-by in the FFPC Dynasty Leagues that they're not carrying a large portfolio of teams, or they're not as serious about it. They try it doesn't work out. Olave is a guy they don't know that much about, and I got to move on, and I got to dump him for a second and fourth. Well, again, I talked about that earlier. That is such a steal for what that could produce on your team next year if you are able to acquire that. And I think Higgins was more that way last year. I think that certainly that price is going to go up here pretty quick. But I'll still take him if I can get him at the right price point.
I think that Dynasty is all about buying and selling at the right time.
Yes.
And if you can get a distressed asset like Chris Olave on the cheap right now, he is a proven player coming off a down year. If you are buying him based on, or if somebody is selling him, that's certainly at least in part based on the concussions. So that is already baked into the trade acquisition. I'm with you. Like Olave on the cheap right now, that is something. If you're doing that, I think you're doing it the right way, and certainly something that I think you are well versed in, Jeff. As we conclude our conversation with you tonight, so much good stuff for anybody who streamed this, viewed it, listened to it, downloaded it. I think they're in for a treat because we got a lot of good information from you, and it's definitely caused me to rethink the way I think about certain players that we've discussed tonight. We will continue to follow you on the X at JDsing. A good luck and best wishes to you in 2025, and hopefully all your teams turn out. And I'll probably run into you at Cleo's or sometime, someplace downtown Appleton.
Where you'll be selling a guy 2 hot tubs for his new
and 2 hot tubs. Yeah.
I think I can sell hot tubs if if you ever have an opening.
Right.
Yeah. You're in the business for sure. And we're in the business with you, Jeff. We'll have to have you back on sometime for sure.
This is great.
And good luck in all your leagues, my friend. This was great. Be good and have a fantastic weekend.
See you in Las Vegas.
There you go. Thanks, Jeff. That's Jeff Desing, 3-time FFPC Dynasty League winner and Appleton, Wisconsin native. So glad to have him on tonight as the tour to Appleton. Ferrell, I think I'm gonna have to start a second podcast and just have like the Appleton Fantasy Football Podcast and just have a rotation.
Did you know Jeff before he became an
FFPC? This is what's crazy about this. So
I think I know more people in Appleton than you do. I definitely know Leroy knows more.
Right, that is true. I did not know Jeff before this, and when I was looking for to book guests on the show, I was looking for people who have been very successful Dynasty players since we're getting to the Dynasty portion of the season. And I sent an email to Jeff, And then when he said, yeah, I'd love to be on the show, I went and I looked at his account and just kind of like getting a feel of like, what players he had rostered, what players would be good to talk about on the show tonight. And then I looked, I'm like, are you kidding me? Appleton, Wisconsin? Did not know he was from Appleton. And so that he agrees. It's unbelievable. Never
such a big city.
Exactly. Yeah.
But neither one of you guys bit and asked me why you need 2 hot tubs. That's what it was.
Well, I figured you were going to explain it, and then you never did. Why do you need 2 hot tubs?
Easy. One for soaking, one for stroking.
Come on. On that note, we
2.
Bring it to the show tonight. I'm gonna save our emails for next week since we're up against it. We will be back, Ferrell, at Friday next week.
Next Friday.
Back on our regular schedule. A big thank you to you, not only for hanging out with me tonight, but on behalf of everybody who attended and drafted in the KFFSC on the big Super Sunday weekend. So much. I had a blast. The only thing that would have made it better is if I actually made it down there, which I plan on doing soon.
We'll have you there next year. It's been a yearly promise, and it's going to happen. And we got to have you there, Balky.
Yeah.
And it's You're a great player. You're a great host, and one of the leading contributors of fantasy football anywhere in the country.
Oh, well, thank you. That is way, way too kind.
It's true.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So now I'm looking at the KFFSC right now. Do we have anything up right now at the moment?
No, you've missed your chance. If you're not there, And no, things will be up later in the month in February.
Okay, so it won't be that a couple more weeks, and you can register at kffsc.com for any of the things that the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship has going on. Ferrell, we'll be paying attention to that. I wish you a very happy and a healthy weekend, and let's do this again a week from this coming Friday.
Thank you, Bob.
That is Ferrell Elliott, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, hanging out with me tonight here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I want to thank him. I want to thank Jeff Deasing, our guest tonight. And I want to thank each and every one of you for listening, streaming, downloading, viewing, what have you. Rob and Bryce, of course, for hanging out and making things run smoothly as well. As I mentioned, next Friday, February 21st, we will be live again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be going live on the FFPC YouTube channel and the FFPC socials tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, as well as on the Better Sports Network. Fantasy Alarm and Fantasy and Frames. Colby Conway, the authoritarian for Fantasy Spin, is going to be my guest co-host for 2 full hours starting at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. That's on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the on the Better Sports Network, as well as all the FFPC socials as well. Play the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball tournaments available now at myffpc.com. $125 entry fee will get you into a $40,000 grand prize, which is up from last year's $25,000 grand prize. $35 entry fee in the Superflex Best Ball tournament. $10,000 at stake in that for the grand prize there. Tournaments are going to run all the way through April 24th. 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour drafts going on there. Pick up a Dynasty Orphan if you want to compete against the likes of Jeff Deasing and much more. Entry fees range from $77 all the way up to $5,000. Many teams have already been discounted for 2025. 1,800 plus leagues over the last 1,500 years, and 1,500 years over the last 15 years. 1,500 years would be something. None have ever folded. You can pick up those Dynasty Orphans at myffpc.com. That is where you can also join the FFPC Big Gorilla Tournament. Right now, $1 million grand prize drafts off and running, $350 entry fee, 3-pack for just $1,000. Drafts are already running with live drafts and slow drafts as well. The early Rampage tournament is going on. Make sure you're getting into that. You join the FFPC Big Gorilla right now. You're basically getting 2 tournaments for the price of 1 entry fee. The 7 Bananas promo is live as well. We've already awarded a free $125 FFPC Best Ball Tournament team to one of the players who's been lucky enough to get the 7 pick 2 times in a row. Remember, if you get the 7 pick 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times in a row, you're going to get a FFPC Jungle Safari, a real life jungle safari, or you can just take the $50,000 cash option there as well. That's if you get the 7 pick 5 times in a row in the FFPC Big Gorilla. MyFFPC.com is where to register for that. Remember to like, subscribe, comment on this video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live here on the FFPC YouTube channel, which will be 7 o'clock tomorrow night with myself and Fantasy Alarm, Fantasy and Frames, Colby Conway for 2 full hours. Going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching early this week. We'll be back next Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Your weekend officially starts very early right now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Ferrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Just a little bit of exposition on what I was talking about with the 7 Bananas promo. If you get the 7 pick 2 times in a row in the FFPC Big Gorilla, you're going to get a free best ball tournament entry. We've already given that away once. If you get it 3 times in a row, you get a free main event entry. That's valued at $2,200. If you get the 7 pick 4 times in a row, you will get a free High Society League entry. That is a $10,000 value. You will be one of the teams in one of our High Society Leagues, a $10,000 entry fee, and you will get it for free. And then again, the 5th 7 pick in a row that you get in the Big Gorilla, you will get a Jungle Safari for $4,000 or $50,000. Something we've never done before. We hope to award it this year. We'll see what happens. For all of you complaining that you always get the same pick every draft, hopefully you're getting the 7 pick every draft this year, as you can take advantage of either a free best ball tournament entry, free main event entry, free High Society entry, or a free Jungle Safari for $4,000. MyFFPC.com is where to register for that right now. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk with you next week.